I'm Nova Han. I'm a creative director for music festivals, stage shows, concerts, and immersive experiences around the world. My work has been seen by hundreds of thousands at festivals like Coachella, Electric Forest, Burning Man, and Firefly. I've worked with artists like Deadmau5, Bass Nectar, and the String Cheese Incident. My job has me searching the globe to discover the industry's best artists in installations, performance, movement, set design, costumes, and emerging technologies to create some of the world's greatest live entertainment experiences. Audiences see the awe-inspiring spectacle of the final product, but they have no idea what it takes to get there. We the Creators explores the lives of the artists behind the magic, what drives them to do what they do, the sacrifices they've made, and the pain they've overcome to make art at any cost. Behind every great artist is an even greater story. This is We the Creators. Hi, and welcome to another We the Creators, where our mission is to showcase the incredible artists in immersive arts and the epic journeys they took to get there. Today, we're with my friend and incredible artist, Tigre Bailando. Tigre is a spoken word artist, a dancer, an installation artist, sculptor, painter, and storyteller. Their works have been seen at festivals and cultural gatherings around the globe. Tigre's works are evocative, raw, and always dancing between the lines of light and dark, male and female, life and death, modern and ancient. Tigre embodies the role as a guide and sherpa through these transient worlds of gray space and invites guests to look further within themselves. Tigre is someone that I can't even begin to define with linear language. They are truly one of their own persons, defined by art imitating life, imitating art, imitating life in one unique sphere that makes Tigre. Hi, Tigre. Welcome.
Hi.
So good to see you, and so good to see you with your short curly mop. Adorable.
Yeah. New look. New reality, new look.
Curly hair sisters over here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is kind of my gift to my grandmother.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, did she not like seeing you in dreadlocks?
So I always had like weird haircuts and like weird. The first time I had a mohawk, I was like 5 years old, and my grandmother always took all of my like haircuts and tattoos and weirdness as like a personal affront to her, and she'd always be like, "You have such beautiful hair. Why do you ruin it?" And you're like, "Well, I like it like this." But she actually passed away in January. And but it was the last few months she really enjoyed seeing my hair, and so as I like grow it out and really let it do all of its like natural curly stuff that she loved, I just kind of imagine her looking down. And
well, and that's interesting, because I feel like, just going back to the intro, in some ways, you are one of the most unique individuals that I have ever met, and I know a lot of unique mofos.
Yes, you do.
You know what I mean? Like, we know some
Yes,
interesting individuals, but you truly are your own unique person. And I imagine just growing up, being so fiercely who you are, that must have been met with a lot of challenges, especially like you mentioned your grandma and her idea of what she wanted you to be. And a lot of people's ideas of wanting to understand, if not define who you are, wanting to understand who you are and not getting a clear-cut answer. I imagine that must have been challenging growing up.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's interesting, because the first thing I have to say is that I have had an incredibly blessed life. I've been incredibly well cared for. I've been deeply understood by a lot of people who are really important to me. I've been given a lot of opportunities and support to really pursue whatever my truth is. So I know a lot of people don't get that, or even anything close to that. And I just need to like make sure that it's understood. Like, I am really grateful for a lot. And also, yes, it was hard growing up. I kind of always was like in between and outside of all of the categories, like having this really complicated ethnic background and kind of not really sure where I fit in there, and always having this kind of, I never really fit into like what it meant to be a little boy, like a little brown boy, you know?
Mm.
And I spent a lot of time, I mean, it was, in some ways, I just was really raised to understand and appreciate that in myself and wasn't necessarily forced, especially by my mother. She was very supportive of me being just whoever I ended up being. But I mean, there's a whole society with all kinds of ideas. And yeah, in some ways, I always just was just me, just a little arty weirdo, queerdo before I even knew it. And in some ways, you know, tried to fit in. Like I remember being little and people not being able to tell if I was a boy or a girl, and not really
Mm.
understanding that like that was good and okay, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, I was a ballet dancer when I was really little and got to a certain point where like the bullying and the pressure and the names and whatever, you know, I feel that even from the girls I would dance with, I was literally the only male-bodied dancer in the company.
Mm.
And
Hmm.
and at the same time being raised with, you know, like I didn't really, my father wasn't really around, but the folks who were kind of the father figures were like numerous queer artists. And then, you know, like Prince and Michael Jackson and all of these people that really did reflect that complexity. But I mean, I really even only came into owning and recognizing my gender queerness a couple of years ago, you know, and that was a really long
Yeah.
process. And a lot of the preliminary work was done through my art before it really came into my consciousness of myself in terms of
Mm.
how I present and how I address myself and address myself to people, you know. So
Right, because even when we met, we've known each other for years throughout the community. Through art and dance and festival installation stuff, and watching you come to Electric Forest year after year and building upon your project there. And I've always seen you, and the way that it looks to me, at least, is it looks to me like there is this complete freedom with you in being able to. I've never seen you stick to a binary gender role, in the kind of conventional ways. And I've seen it really celebrated within you. And it's actually interesting to hear that you also faced that as a child, that like, that was something that you were having an experience with as a child too, where that was just literally how you were born, who you were, and maybe just having more, less context of how to understand it then.
yeah, even 30 years ago, it was a different world than it is now, you know. So
Absolutely.
I really am so, even though kids that are growing up today are still, I mean, they're dealing with a lot, and a lot of them are dealing with it really impressively. But I am also grateful that there is so much more space for that to really be celebrated culturally, you know, in a broad
Mm-hmm.
sense. And people are really fighting, like it's really this battle going on to free all of these souls and spirits that have been constrained by expectations of who they can be and what they can be and what is possible, you know.
Mm.
So
Mm.
and that fight was happening long before I was born. And I mean, I grew up in the 80s, and a lot of my, like I said, a lot of my caregivers were like weird punk glam queerdo art kids, you know. My mom was not that, but my mom was a, is a deep lover of art and truth and eccentricity and all those things.
That's awesome. So you've always been in a healthy environment that celebrated it.
Yeah, intimately, my intimate environment has always
Yeah,
celebrated it, and the
sure.
external environment has always been this tricky, very antagonistic thing.
Mm.
And the thing, and I don't want to dwell on this too much, but I've realized, even, I mean, part of quarantine for me, I think for a lot of people, is this internal reckoning, you know, and especially with all the things that are,
Mm.
and there's a lot for all of my nurturing, beautiful, weird upbringing. There's still so much internalized that I am deconstructing around, you know, trying to fit into something, or fear of what if I do step more into
stand
this?
out too much, or
Would I be okay? Am I taking space from somebody else? Should I be small? All of these things. It's that narrative in our culture is so pervasive and so insidious that even if you have this beautiful, unique upbringing, you still have that inside of you, and it still is something to be wrestled with, which is also beautiful, but it's unfortunate.
And that's something that I feel like touched on briefly just via, on Shrine's Instagram. And in preparing for this show, like I always really like to be representative of people from all different backgrounds. And it was really eye-opening for me to realize that there wasn't that much representation in like people of color, of a queer nature, of people doing big art out there. There really wasn't. And it was really challenging for me to find more people. Thankfully, I know you and we've known each other for a while. But when I really looked at my list of people that I knew that were making really big art projects, 90% of them were white males. And it kind of, first one, I felt shame that I hadn't really seen it before, me being a female of color, not having seen that before, and me being a producer. It was really eye-opening for me to be like, wow, I can't believe I've not seen that before. But it's like, these things happen in such covert ways, right? It's like you feel like our community, our like one love community, that they're so accepting, and in one instance they are, but it still is this trickle down systemic thing where we're seeing that so few people get to express their voices with big statement pieces or big theatrical pieces. And those are the things that define culture. Our culture is defined by the storytellers. And if the storytellers aren't people of color or females, we're only getting one kind of story. So, my question to you is, like in our community that we like to believe is very inclusive, has there ever been a time that you did not feel that you were given an opportunity or the space to include your voice because of the way that you identified yourself?
So this goes back to what I was saying about the insidiousness of this whole cultural system that we have, the oppressive system, however you want to, the white supremacist patriarchy, heteronormative, blah, 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 however you want to describe it.
Sure.
Because I have not ever experienced overt malignant racism in this field. And I am grateful for that. And I think that is a testament to a lot of the values that we hold in this community and in this, this community of creators and artists and things. I think for the most part, people are well-intentioned and really are generally trying to move from their heart and trying to do something good in the world. But the thing with this kind of the idea that thankfully the world is starting to embrace about systemic racism, and the idea that being racist or having racism within you is not about you hating somebody, but it's about a whole system of preferences and expectations and assumptions that we are often not even aware of. And so with that, you don't know, like I see other artists who I feel like we kind of started off around a similar time, and I've seen other artists, at least from my perception, kind of excel at a faster rate than I have felt that I do. And I don't know, is there something about the bias of how I present, whether it's the color of my skin or the nature of my gender expression or whatever, or are they just better, or like creating something that has, just
that they see has more value, or whatever,
or is it because they were raised with a more business savvy background, and so they know how to navigate into that world a little bit more? I really don't know. And for myself, I try not to focus on that too much because I don't know, and chasing that question that can never really be answered will eat you alive. But I also try to hold the sense that there are all these forces that kind of determine who becomes more successful or whose career progresses or whatever, and things that are out of my control. And
But why do you think that there are so, and I have my own theories, and I don't know if I'm just being judgmental or what, but why do you think that there are so few people of color and females that are making big statement pieces?
Yeah, I mean, I think because the industry we're in, for all that people are, it's transformational and trying to create a new paradigm and whatever, like people are within the same bias systems. And I mean, the art world in general is still dominated by cis white men. Women and artists of color are still decades behind, and really, I mean, centuries behind in building an established voice and really being prominent. And so I think our industry is only a couple decades old, really. And so I think some of those things, maybe there's a lag time, maybe it's still, but I mean, this is something I have always been aware of, and a few years ago, once I started having more of my own experience and a little bit of clout and a little bit of, starting to get a little bit of budgets and things, I've really tried to focus on hiring women and folks of color in my build crew, because part of the thing actually is that building skills, similar to computer skills, building skills are already gender taught towards little boys. You think of home ec and shop class, right? Which I know even when I grew up, that was not gendered, but the ideas around that are still gendered. You still are more likely to have a little boy to be taught and given tools at an early age and, brought to work with their dad or whatever on helping to build the shed. And so you have those things already set up in upbringing in children. And so then when somebody is ready to step into a career, the skills that they have will impact what's available to them. And I learned that because I would cast out and I'd be looking for carpenters to help me build my projects, and specifically looking for non-cis white men, not because they aren't amazing. I know lots of incredible builders, but just to break it up, just to give opportunity, and it's hard.
Right.
And I know I could do better at looking for it and strategizing how to change that. But even while actively searching for that, it's hard to find because
and that's just a symptom of the systems that we've set up and the gender roles that we consider, and in some regards. But I will say that I also hire many teams and I will hire more males sometimes for certain roles, because if they are genuinely stronger and they're going to be able to more easily haul some lumber, but if I, in a side by side, if there was a female that was equally as capable, in certain roles, then of course I would hire a female. I really don't consider those things. I really just consider the proficiency of the person. I think that when it comes to the big art world, though, I think that a lot of times it is white males, because and this is just my theory, because it's born out of there is a lot of it that's born out of a privilege that you have this inherent trust and this inherent feeling that if you go out on a whim and you do something crazy and stupid, like raise hundreds of thousands of dollars to fucking blow on on an art project for a week out at Burning Man, you have this inherent trust that you're going to come back and be okay economically, that you're going to have there's going to be something to land on. And I'm going to say it comes from a certain kind of privilege, for one, that a lot of times white males are afforded. I'm not going to say it's a white male privilege specifically, but many white males are afforded a type of privilege, which is having that safety net, because doing that kind of art is fucking insane. Just straight up making your life's mission to go be I want to make a giant rubber ducky disco duck what the fuck?
In the desert with thousands of people who could die.
Yeah, with thousands of people who could die. I'm going to give up, months and months and months of my life to dedicate to making this. I mean, that can only come from a certain level of privilege of, economic status, social status, all of these things. to be able to make such a sacrifice, time and money wise. And so very, very, very few people have that opportunity. So it is kind of a bummer for me to like pull the lens back and to really see like, fuck, that means that like there are only, again, this small faction of people that are telling their side of the story. And I guess what that just really means is there needs to be more programs that are really dedicated to lifting the voices of people of color, of women.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think that this collective reckoning we're going through, where these kinds of conversations are happening so much, the initial feeling of that's a bummer, like it's just sad to recognize that. And especially if we haven't been as aware of it as we all of a sudden are, that feels hard. But I think what we do with that is exactly what you're saying. We figure out ways to use that awareness to build something new, And so, like I said, I've tried to focus and seek out builders that break that norm, that identity norm, but maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's like you're saying, a program. Maybe there's some type of like training.
Well, and in that, I feel like kind of pulling away from that for just a bit, but a lot of your works, you do use your voice really eloquently. I feel like from your spoken word to your dance pieces, your costuming, your environment building, they all have these really deeply sensed storylines. I feel like people can feel them instantly when they walk in, and oftentimes I feel like you're always evoking people to kind of meander through this world of spirit world versus, the world as we know it. I'm kind of curious to know, like, what are the stories that you're just obsessed about telling right now, especially in this time and age?
Yeah, for sure. A big intention of mine for a long time. And I think from the point that there was a kind of specific shift in my 20s, I guess, where I really not only found my voice, but conjured it forward and really conjured forward, like, how do I want to focus and drive my work to create something of worth? And it is about creating a world and bringing people into it, and not even creating a world, I guess, but feeling into the world that I sense actually exists and trying to find ways to access that. And so in terms of now, I mean, there's a lot, this is almost, it's so obvious it feels like a non-statement, but there's a lot of shadow. We're going through a lot of shadow. We're facing a lot of this stuff that's been pushed down, that's been ignored, whether it's power and beauty that we have suppressed and called ugly, or whether it's ugliness inside of us that we have ignored. We're really confronting with that in this huge way, in a way that feels like it's getting more and more every day. And that has really been present for me. And for the past couple of years, I mean, I look back on some of the work even before things got to the place where they did, and it feels like it's really been almost anticipating that. And it's a lot of the sense of being turned on yourself, or this place between being intimate and tender and soft and being a lover, and also the violence and the pain and the tearing apart. And that's simultaneous, the tension of that, of, this power and this rawness and this hardness and harshness, and then that soft, weeping, tender, sweet,
because I feel like I see that a lot in and I love how you describe that, the tender sweetness and softness, because like almost all of the mask work that I've seen that you've created is like, they're all of these like really ancient, wise, sage, tender, soft, sweet entities that make you feel safe and held and cuddled in a way, benign, these benign spirits. They almost look like they would come out of a part of a Miyazaki movie.
Yeah, he's amazing. I mean, he's a master.
Oh my God, yeah. And then also seeing your performance art, though, your performance art is like the polar opposite. Your performance art is like, I'm going to tear my entire soul open for you to just devour on a plate. And it's so visceral. And that juxtaposition is is so interesting.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I have had that, I've known that, but also it feels like you're the first person to really kind of say it back to me. And I've struggled with that at times of how do I bring this more into this other form? You know, how do I bring my sculptural work to bring more of that ferocity and rawness and violence? And I don't know. And that's my process. That's, you know, of either understanding why they kind of come through these different forms or bringing them into cross-pollination. I don't know. But
I mean, I'm not a therapist or anything, but I am an artist. And what my guess would be, you know, if I psychoanalyze this, it almost feels like maybe the performance side is a sharing. It's like your experience, what you're experiencing, what you want to dive through, what you want to, what the experience is that you want to move through, you know, to give other people courage to move through. And then in the environment, so every time I've been in one of your environments, it's always felt like this space of solace. And maybe it's more like what you want to create for people to rest in, because you know that they are feeling that internal violence and it's giving them a place to feel peace.
Yeah, I think you are spot on with that. Definitely the spaces I create are a gift. It's something I'm giving to people. And I think that it's something that I need for myself. You know, I'm creating these spaces that soothe my inner turmoil and violence and the intensity of the world. And so that's, if I'm going to create something for people to be in, I want to create that because I know that other people need that. But when I'm performing, it's like there's so much inside, you know, there's so much storm, and that's the way I can let it out so I can be healed again, you know, and also let it be seen. So like you're saying, other people know that it's okay that exists inside of them because everybody has it. And we're constantly told that we shouldn't have it. And that does more damage than letting it be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. Then putting it on a pedestal and and praising it in a way, like giving it and honoring that space.
Yeah.
Totally. It's kind of like when I started theater, I grew up and was told that I was not allowed to experience the emotions that I was experiencing. I grew up in an Asian household, always felt like cut down for having the thoughts and feelings that I had. And, you know, I really attribute me diving into theater as like really saving my life in a lot of ways. Cause it was, right. It's like the only place that you're actually, it's like everyone else is trying to tell you, like, don't cry, like crying's bad. Like, don't feel these bad things. Like, it'll be okay. And you're like, no, fuck no, dude. Like, I'm feeling all of these really terrible, horrible, sad things. And like theater and performance art is one of the only places that you're actually going to be applauded the more that you go there. In normal society, no one's applauding you if you're fucking having a meltdown. But in performance art, if you genuinely go there, that is kind of the only place that we have in Western society where you will actually be applauded.
Right. 100%. You just gave me chills just feeling the truth of that. You know, we've inherited this idea that we should be ashamed of our emotional animal. The emotional animal of our nature is this thing that we have been taught for centuries to deny and to shut down. And that is the flaw. That is the sin of being human. When in fact, that is the virtue of being human, is the emotional animal. That is our glory. Thank God.
Is that where Tigre Bailando comes from? Dancing Tiger?
Well, I mean, yes, in the large scale, but the name, I didn't pick the name. The name was given to me by a friend. And actually, this is a secret. It was a playa name. It was given to me on playa. But yeah, no, it was given to me by a Dominicano friend. And he said that it was the spirit he saw when he saw me dance. And it was just one of those things that just kind of like when the name was given to me, I was like, oh, this feels real. And it took a little while before I felt like I would
fully embodied it.
Own it. Yeah. But it kind of felt like a call to action, you know? It was this like destiny, like daring me. And so taking on the name for me was a choice of, because it was actually right before I moved to California. I went to Burning Man for the first time. I was still living in Philly where I grew up. I had been out of college a couple of years, kind of floundering, and I went to Burning Man, and then I went traveling for the first time by myself in Latin America. And then it was around the time I came back to the States, I started painting my face every day. I started the face painting project, and I fully took on the Tigre name, and I moved to California. And this was all the process of choosing art, like choosing, I moved to California to be an artist, whatever that was going to mean.
How do you feel like you heard that calling? Like, what were you doing before? And like, how did you tap into that intuition? Because I feel like a lot of people are like, man, I wish I was creative. And you're like, you are. Yeah. You just have to say yes.
Yes. The first thing I'll say to that is, it is one of my core beliefs that creativity is the defining human characteristic. It is like the way that like eagles have wings and tigers have claws, human beings have creativity. It is our evolutionary niche. It is the thing that everything else is, all of the rest of our evolution is built around. So that's, everybody's creative. That is inherently just the nature. If we are
built as the universe or as God, and God and universe are ultimate creators, then that means that like our essence is that we are also creators.
Yeah, exactly. But to answer your question, so in a really dry sense, I'll say I went to art school. It was great. I graduated art school in the fall of 2008. The economy crashed. I spent my first job out of college. I was hand painting T-shirts for this like street art fashion company, Mesquite. It was terrible. Being a professional artist, it's not always what it's cracked up to be. Anyway, then the economy collapsed. So that was done. I just did some weird manual labor stuff for a while. And then I got a job as a preschool teacher at the school I had gone to as a preschool student. And I did that for 2 years, and it was amazing. It was beautiful. But as anybody who's a teacher knows, that shit takes 150% every day, all day. And so trying to also be an artist and make art, even though I was doing art with these kids every day, you know, I would work 8 hours with children, and then I would go home and I would work another 8 hours.
But how did you take that plunge? Was it just like you just like had the calling, or?
I think it was honestly a few years of just kind of grinding and doing art, but just knowing that it was a compromise, and just eventually just not being able to take it anymore, you know? But I'll say Burning Man definitely deserves at least some credit. It feels cliche.
Burning Man, all of us are just like Burning Man made me.
Burning Man, that feels like a cop-out, but also I have to say that going to Burning Man, it was not like, oh my God, I didn't know this could exist, but it was just that feeling of coming home. It really was. And it was that sense of the scale people were working and the risks people were taking. It was inspiring, you know, and then travel, you know, there's, like I said, it was kind of this long process that culminated in me taking. And even when I moved to California, there was still years where I was hustling jewelry on the street. I was teaching again. I was a barista, you know, that hustle was a while. And then eventually I started to do the work. I mean, at some point, no matter what, it's a leap of faith. And I learned that, you know, lots of Shrine and other artists, you know, I would have those conversations. They were like, at some point, you just have to trust yourself and trust whatever and just go for it. And it's multiple leaps of faith, right? Because we're always growing. And each time you're on the precipice of your own growth, takes a leap of faith, takes trust that you will not crash into the bottom of the abyss.
Well, and it's a willingness to reinvent yourself all the time.
Yeah, all the time. And to question yourself.
Yeah, and to question yourself. Yeah, absolutely. We're getting close to running out of time, but I do want to hear about, like, I know that you've been really active right now in all of like your activism work, and I just kind of want to hear a little bit about like some of the works that you're creating currently, or how you're using your work to promote, you know, to promote the agendas that you are.
Yeah. So it's definitely, this moment we're in has definitely, like I said earlier, has felt like a reckoning and felt had like a call to action in this way of how do we not just feel depressed by the endless cycle of what we're struggling with, but be
Mm-hmm.
inspired by the actual change that is happening over time and the energy that is here. And I've been really trying to lean into that. And so I've been starting to organize with some local folks, some local youth here in Santa Fe, um, and really start to just figure out what have people already been doing, who's already on the ground. I mean, there's a lot of people working really hard. I mean, the indigenous struggle here is super real because the population is
Right.
really present, but there's still, centuries of genocide and colonization and all those things. And then the Black community here and the organizing, even though it's a very small minority, there still is a community here. And how do we make ourselves heard and acknowledged and all those things? So starting to do more real grassroots stuff, which is kind of the first time for me really doing a more kind of traditional activist role. And it feels really good to connect to that. It's hard work, but it's inspiring. Some of these kids are so smart and so passionate.
Oh my God. Yeah.
You're 17. Are you kidding me? So
They
eloquent.
are. Yes.
So yeah, that's been really inspiring. A lot of it times just like trying to support these kids. And then also just leaning into my art, and just remembering that that is my strongest tool. And that is such an important
Mm.
act of revolutionizing culture, which culture is always in the process of revolution, right? That's just turning. All revolution is just a turning of the cycle. It's not this like earth-shattering thing. It doesn't need to be that. It's just the necessary cycling into newness, shedding oldness. So using my art for that, and I've done some kind of crowdfunding things, designing some shirts and some posters and things that people can kind of show whether it's their solidarity or their own struggle, and using that to generate funds. And maybe we can have some links to that
That's
somewhere to do
awesome.
that. And then the thing I'm really excited about is a good friend of mine who I lived with in LA, who has this amazing organization called Love Activists. And she's just so dedicated to really empowering and saving the lives of these incredible Black and brown kids in LA. So that is super exciting. And there's a bunch of artists that are involved in that. There's like, I don't know, 8 different artists, Black artists and artists of color around the country. There's a couple of these amazing artists from Kenya and South Africa. It's just a really vibrant, really interesting project. So that I'm super excited about. And we're trying to just
Cool.
get that out as quickly as possible. I did a performance piece over the weekend for Juneteenth with a good friend of mine that was an invocation, like an ancestral invocation, and we read off all of the names of every Black person who's been killed by police since George Floyd.
Wow.
And I don't know as of today, but this was as of last Friday. That was 30 people.
I love that. And what I also love about that is to be profound, you don't have to make it complicated.
Yeah.
Right. It's like your friend read all of those names and you danced to those names, and that's all that needed to happen for that piece. And anybody can do that.
Yeah.
Anybody, so like to not get in your own way, to be like, oh, I can't make this big giant dream project that I've always imagined. It's like, you can use your voice in your artistry with just your body. That's all you need. Just your body.
Mm-hmm.
So that I think that's really encouraging for people that I think a lot of people at home just not understanding how to share more. Maybe, and maybe that's how I'd like to close it, is just like because I think that you have done so much work to unearth and sheathe and get to, the most authentic form of yourself that is very uniquely Tigre. What piece of advice would you give to people who, because it's just funny. I feel like people are always like, I need to discover myself. Like that's a common phrase that people are like searching for their, themselves. And I feel like you're on the other side of that, where you're like, I can't help but to ooze from every cell of my body, me. So someone who's in that journey, what would you say to them?
I think holding the sense of just becoming, just being the human being as a verb, you know, and the sense of becoming, that we are just constantly becoming ourselves. And so to a certain degree, there's like a relaxing into that, you know, and that's part of when I create. One of the sensations I want people to have when they enter into my spaces is that sense of kind of like falling back into yourself, that it's not, you don't have to fight for it. You don't have to work towards it. You can just relax into it because it's already there. It's the ground underneath you. So that's the first part. And the second part, because I've done a lot I'm constantly working on this. And that is going back to what we said at the beginning about the insidiousness of this cultural condition, because there is so much of that inner voice, that inner critic, that is just the voice of the oppressor ingested inside of us. And it is that inner critic that says, you are not enough. You will never be enough. You will always be a failure. You have to constantly prove yourself. All of these things, which maybe not everybody has, but it seems like the majority of people have, even if they're not aware of it. It's operating there. And for me, recognizing that and the source of that, and being able to say that is not, there's a part of that is me, right? Like there's a part of that is me, but there's also part of it that's not me. And I can look at it and I can say, okay, I know where you come from. And if I don't know why you're here, I at least know that you are here and where you come from, and engage with that in a different way. And it allows me to create some space, because that voice, I mean, for all of my success and all of that I've done, it is a daily struggle with that voice that says, just give up.
Totally. I've heard some people actually say to give it a name as well. Like, that's like, Felicia's back.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I don't have a name, but there's a whole like, I mean,
persona.
Oh yeah, there's a whole persona. There's like, it's covered in fog. He rides on a giant slug. Like there's a whole character there that
he rides on a slug.
Yeah, he rides on a slug.
That's so funny.
Slides under the door of your self-protection, and he just finds his way through the cracks, you know?
Oh wow, interesting. That's actually the being a slug is my inside joke with my boyfriend, as like that's like my super villain character is like is that I will just melt into every crevasse of your body and slowly suffocate you.
Yeah, that's exactly the feeling I have with that kind of critic, antagonist, whatever, shadow, however we want to talk about it. And I think just like that, I think being able to acknowledge it and develop a relationship, and if it's a name, if it's an outfit, if it's a character, if it's a song, whatever, that way we know it's there, and we can it loses some of that power to slide under the cracks and just envelop you, right? You can be like, oh, I see you. Like, I don't think you're getting by.
Yeah. And establishing that it's like, that it is something that is outside of your true essence.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone who is just watching. If you're watching this now or later, just please know that we, like so many, are part of an industry that has been deeply affected by COVID-19. Not having the events where we normally share our works has had a devastating impact on artists like Tigre, myself, and our communities. It also impacts the communities that we give to. So one way that you can be a part of our quest to support the arts and to keep sharing these works is just to spread the word. Let people know about the amazing works that Tigre is doing. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on our pages, etc. It's a small task that goes really far. So we really appreciate that. If you want to follow Tigre on Instagram and on Facebook, TigreBailando. And join us next week, as we'll have a new artist to bring you every Wednesday night. Until then, thank you. Stay safe, be kind, love boldly, and thank you so much, Tigre.
Thank you. This was so fun.